I think that when it comes to Morgan Tsvangirai, we're seeing a new way of understanding politics in the country where it doesn't matter. Everything I have seen since he's passed away has shown that it doesn't matter that he was the opposition. You have people from the ruling party, people from opposition parties that aren't necessarily the MDCT, that are feeling that the country has lost a giant, that the country has lost somebody who loved the country, a patriot, and people feeling that it wasn't any opportune moment for him to leave. But be that as it may, it has happened. But Zimbabweans are pretty distraught.
Having said what you just said,
Yep.
how do you think now that he's gone, in terms of his party, the MDC, how are things going to be? Is it going to be as it used to be?
Well, just before he passed on, there was a lot of discord in the party. A few hours after he passed on, you saw press statements or attempts to make press statements by two opposing factions within the party. And the party supposedly appointed Nelson Chamisa to act as president for the next 12 months within hours of President Tsvangirai dying, and a lot of people question that. A lot of people say, was that necessary? But it could be that those who have done that see that as a way of calming the waters, because there was already a big power wrangle within the party, and they thought they couldn't wait any longer to kind of settle it down. But I think one of the important messages that the MDC, whether it's in its divided factions and in any other, with all its competitors, what the MDC is trying to say about Morgan Tsvangirai is that even though he's passed on, he seemed, and according to them, he's a man who achieved what he wanted to achieve. He pushed the country a little further, delegitimized Mugabe in a strong way, and also weakened him to the extent that in November last year he was removed out of power. And that is credit to what Morgan Tsvangirai did and certainly achieved by opposing Mugabe at a time when nobody believed Mugabe could be opposed. And you see that before Morgan Tsvangirai came into power, it wasn't even possible to think about opposing Mugabe post-1990, when Mugabe had finished his genocide in the country that left him a feared man, a man who had absolute power. So really the MDC thinks that Morgan Tsvangirai achieved most of his goals, which was a transformation and bringing an end to the Mugabe regime. And to a certain extent, he seemed to have lived a full life and completed most of his goals.
You are a former member of the MDC, and you also worked under Morgan Tsvangirai as his advisor. How can you describe him?
I mean, Morgan Tsvangirai was a human being like me and you. He had his strengths, he had his weaknesses. But what you're not going to take from him is that when it was necessary, when Zimbabwe needed somebody who would take them beyond the Mugabe era, beyond the Mugabe euphoria, he stood by principle. He moved on forward. He faced some of the most difficult challenges. He, at some point, faced treason charges. He was hospitalized after beatings, and he still pushed on and moved forward with that. So for all his humanness, he also had something extra to him that made him an endeared name in the minds and hearts of Zimbabweans. Even people in government, to a certain extent, respected his tenacity, respected his courage, and he goes to rest as a man who made a difference while he walked on earth.
Talking of making a difference, as you just pointed out, many people will regard him as their hero, but many also will remember him as this man who tried by all means to get into power, i.e. during the 2008 election, which many people, including international observers, said he won, but it was rigged by the Mugabe government. But then later he worked with the same government by becoming the Prime Minister of Zimbabwe. So many of his supporters were disappointed, and many people outside Zimbabwe as well were disappointed seeing him working with the Mugabe government, becoming the Prime Minister. So in your opinion, how do you think he will be remembered, both in Zimbabwe and you, the diasporans abroad?
I mean, I think the 2008 election that was rigged by Mugabe was a pivotal moment. It's going to be a moment of history, because we all know that in the first round of that election, beat Mugabe by a huge margin, at least 3% in the election. That shows you very clearly that the gentleman had a lot of popularity. And then he wasn't able to run in the second round because Mnangagwa was suggested and ran an operation of extreme violence against the opposition to an extent that it wasn't possible to participate in the election without causing a lot of death. And after that, that polarized the country, polarized politics to the extent that it was only even Mugabe was unable to take the country forward. And Morgan Tsvangirai and the MDC and other opposition parties came in to help bring the country together and bridge those differences so that we could at least move forward. And you saw with during the period that Morgan Tsvangirai was Prime Minister that the economy picked up a little, that things settled in the economy, and that people seemed to think that everything was improving on an upward trend. By the end, when that ended, things started to go down once again. So you were seeing that a lot of Zimbabweans will in fact and must in fact be thankful for the participation of the MDC and President Morgan Tsvangirai in the government of national unity. And it is perhaps the one thing that is going to be remembered for, not just by members of the MDC, but members of ZANU-PF as well, because they certainly benefited from the economic stabilization and normalization that took place in that period.